Some folks like to get away, take a holiday from the neighborhood, hop a flight to Miami Beach or to Hollywood. But I'm taking a Greyhound on the Hudson River line. I'm in a New York state of mind.
Land of many colors.
We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Young and old together.
We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing.
Here come the lesbians, here come the leaping lesbians. We're gonna please you, tease you, hypnotize you, try to squeeze you. We're gonna get you if we can. Here come the lesbians. Don't go and try to fight it, run away or try to hide it. We want your loving, that's our plan. Here come the lesbians.
May God's blessing keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. May you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you.
May the last one burn into flames. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose, yeah. Freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause I need freedom too. First I was afraid, I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong. And I grew strong, and I learned how to get along. And so you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here with that sad look upon your face. I should have changed that stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I'd have known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Go on now, go. Walk down the door. Just turn around now. 'Cause you're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one who tried to hurt me with goodbye? Did you think I'd crumble? Did you think I'd lay down and die? Oh, no, not I will survive. Oh, as long as I know how to love, I know I'll stay alive. I've got all my life to live, and I've got all my love to give, and I'll survive. I will survive. Hey, hey.
Friends, I'll say it clear and state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway and more, much more than this. I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful footstep along the byway, yeah. Oh, much more than this, I did it my way.
Welcome everyone to Feminist Legacies, a celebration of the life work of Beth Schneider. My name is Jane Ward, and I'm a former PhD student of Beth's, and I'm so honored to host and MC this event today. You know, where does someone even start with such a long and rich career with such breadth and diversity of impact that Beth has had? Beth's not only an accomplished scholar, a journal editor, an administrator, a teacher and mentor, but also an activist, a community leader, and a parent. So today we're going to honor these contributions holistically with an exciting lineup of speakers who are going to sing Beth's praises and reveal her secrets. So we want to jump right in. There may be even more unauthorized photographs of Beth from deep in the archive. But first, a couple of notes about how things are going to go. So folks who are on the program already know who you are, and I will call on you or write to you in the chat to let you know you're up. And you can please unmute yourself when it's your time to speak. And at the end, we'll open up for an open mic of sorts for anyone who'd like to speak who isn't on the program. The chat is also open if you want to share some words there. We've already got some chatting going there. We ask that everyone please keep your mics muted so that we can hear our speakers and not your dog barking or leaf blowers and so on. And if you have any technical issues, please let us know in the chat, and my wife Kat, who is running our tech today, will see if she can help you out. And now I'm going to turn things over to Beth for a welcome. We're going to unmute Beth. You are now unmuted, Beth.
Well, all right, I don't know what to say, but I only have a minute here. So what I want to say in this minute is I'm so glad that you're all here and joining for this event. Retirement was 3 years ago. It took everything Jane had and a lot of moral support on her part to get me to this day. And I'm grateful to her. I'm also grateful to Kat, who is the tech person and who turned my PowerPoint into a film. And what can I say? I'm going to thank everyone who's on the Zoom. They're family members of mine, they're sociology colleagues, they're women's political committee people. Who am I leaving out? There's very old friends who are on the Zoom. I hope you all stay for as much of this as possible. Have your breakfast while you're listening and watching. And I'm grateful in advance to those who spoke, because I know they got some really rigorous demands on Jane's part that they stick between 3 and 5 minutes, and we'll see what happens. So we're going to turn it back to Jane, who's the mastermind of all of this, and let's see how it goes. Again, I'm grateful, and at some point I'll be happy to talk to you about my art, which is pretty much not going to come up today. So see you all later, and I'm going to look at your pictures and see how you've changed since the 2 decades since I've seen you. Okay, take care. Jane, you're on.
All right. So our first speaker is Peter Nardi. Hello, Peter.
Oh, hello, everyone. Can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes. Hi.
Good, great. Good to see you again, Jane. It's been
Good to see
some
you.
time. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I was just jotting down a handful of things that made me think about Beth over the years. And so let me just read a few of them. I first met Beth in the mid-1980s at the ASA meetings, I think in the early years of our caucus. So it's been quite some time. My fond memories are, of course, taking walks and hikes with her around the Santa Barbara campus with our respective partners, Susan and Jeff, seeing the butterflies in Goleta. We also spent many hours at PSA and ASA committee meetings over the years, which were all made bearable by her wonderful way of framing issues and getting to the heart of the matter. Sharing helpful hints over the years when we both edited sociology journals. I did sociological perspectives and she was doing gender and society. I also remember, Beth, when we edited a special section for Ken Plummer in Sexualities on the 25th anniversary of Simon and Gagnon's Sexual Conduct. And of course, you and I edited that reader on sociological perspectives of lesbian and gay studies, a massive project and wonderful to cooperate with. Sharing meals, and of course, over the years with so many of our friends and so many of the people here. And as well as I remember a particular 25th anniversary, I think it was for Ken and Everett. More importantly, just our personal friendship over the years, which of course 40 years worth. I remember fondly talking with you about you and Susan's wanting to be parents, and of course Noah Kai bringing that to fruition. Very touching conversations we had, bringing me to tears many times. You meant a lot to me, and your friendship for 40 years, our political, our professional, and our personal lives have been a real joy. So many more years of friendship to come as we're all retired, and look forward to seeing you. Jeff's at the gym, but he just said to say hello, and he might pop in sometime during there to wave. Take care. Best love. Thank you.
I guess I need no introduction.
This is Sarah Fenstermaker, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. 42 years and 3 to 5 minutes. Ideally, 3 to 4 minutes. These are not such easy numbers. So my little comment took some culling, and I have 3 little memories, and I'm asking them to do all the work. But I want to thank Jane and Beth for giving me the chance to remember so much as I thought about what I might say today. And that was the best slideshow I've ever seen. So, period. My first memories of Beth are from the day she arrived, fresh from the barricades of Northampton and Amherst to the strange world of Southern California, and stranger still, UC Santa Barbara sociology. As the weeks went on, I remember one of Beth's first faculty meetings. In those days, they were quite the affair. White, male, testosteronic, that's an adjective, and I would say generally very puffed up. At this Wednesday meeting, I was sitting next to Beth as one of our elders spoke up. After he finished, she passed me a note. It said, "Either he is a psychotic or a genius." Later, with so many of her observations, Beth was proved right. But well, I'm not going to tell you in which direction in this case. Time marched on, of course. I got tenure and later Beth got tenure, and the white men came and went, as they do. Beth was my closest colleague. I think we served as mutual reality checks for each other in the department. And we changed, and we made change. One of my fondest memories was having lunch at Alice's, a little cafe in the basement of Cheadle Hall. There, Beth and I, on a napkin, mapped out a curriculum for the gestational UCSB Women's Studies program. Later adopted with virtually no changes, it served women's studies, now feminist studies, and its eager students for years. I'll close out these briefest of remarks with a story from before Beth arrived. There we were in the conference room, I as the only woman and the youngest with the faculty. We were discussing whether or not to hire Beth Schneider. One faculty member spoke up and said he was just ambivalent and had a question for us. Did she have, he asked, the flavor of greatness? Did she? Quite apart from the fact that I didn't know greatness had a flavor, but okay. And quite apart from the fact that at that moment, I petulantly made a kind of slurping sound. Over the years, I did witness greatness in Beth as she crafted such a meaningful career in not the easiest of places. On behalf of all of us, I thank her for her intellectual honesty, her compassion for her students, her steadfast grip on feminist principles, her commitment to change in the world beyond the academy, and her unending personal loyalty to all of us. Finally, I would say that the journey Beth and I took together, now 42 years later, has been one of the great privileges of my life and one that I will always treasure. Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't prepared to be maybe crying. Thank you so much, Sarah. Our next speaker is Val Janess.
All right. Thanks, Jane, for organizing this. I think we all appreciate very much how much time and energy goes into these wonderful occasions. So I want to begin by just saying thank you, Jane. And like Peter and Sarah, I call her Sally, but Sarah, I want to harken back to the time I met Beth. There was lots going on. And let me just remind you, this was when Microsoft released Windows 1.0. I don't know what version we're on now. You might remember this charity single called "We Are the World, We Are the Children," very famous for Aid for Africa. First guy that had a open heart surgery left the hospital alive. And Beth in New York, first state to require seatbelts in '85. And Michael Jordan was Rookie of the Year. Lots to come in 1985. It's an important year for me in 1985 because I met Beth Schneider. It was a really good year, and in many ways it was a life-changing year because I met Beth and embarked on a long, long relationship with Beth. So here I am 38 years later, and I just want to say it's been a real privilege to have a 38-year relationship with Beth, and it's a real privilege to get to talk for a few minutes about her career and celebrate her retirement and acknowledge her legacy, or should I say legacies, plural. I'm Beth's graduate student, I'm her collaborator and colleague, and I'm her friend, and I would probably order those in reverse order if I had it to do over again in this talk. I first and foremost enter as a friend. The first time I met Beth as a graduate student, up to a few months ago when I asked her a very important question that I'm going to share with you her answer, but hang on for that. I want to say I cherish, Beth, these almost 4 decades of your role modeling, your mentorship, and your friendship, and I want to just touch on each very briefly. Beth, for those who know her, is a path breaker who has created space, institutional and otherwise, for me and so many other people as we navigate our careers and as we try to find our place in the world as people and professionals. Now, as most of you know, Beth is an academic, is best known for her scholarship on sex and gender and sexuality, as well as social movements and political action. Her books and articles and chapters on the workings of heteronormativity and social control of sexuality and the politics surrounding the AIDS epidemic is path-breaking and pace-setting because over the course of her career, she has demonstrated time and time again a knack for kind of being ahead of the curve, if you will. So, for example, when I met Beth in 1985, she was studying sexual harassment of lesbians at a time when sexual harassment studies were proliferating, but Beth was the only one asking about the experience of lesbians. Thereafter, she was one of the first sociologists to interrogate AIDS, which at the time was seen as a medical issue, more so than a sociological one. And more recently, she completed an edited volume for Gender and Society with Jane that really tried to interrogate what they called the reaches of heteronormativity. So on all these fronts, institutional space for others to do important, because this scholarship aligns with her approach to what I call legendary mentoring, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about it today. Beth models a willingness to take on topics that might not be central to sociology as a discipline, and by doing that herself, encourages her students and others to take on things that might not be seen as central. Quick example from my own experience. As my advisor when I was a graduate student at UCSB, Beth provided incredible enthusiasm and support when I decided to study the prostitutes' rights movement. Now, I mention this because she did so in a context where others advised me against taking on this topic because it might not be the best dissertation to, quote, launch a career. That was the phrase I heard a lot. I recall very vividly talking to Beth about, is it a good topic? Can we get it done? And I emphasized the word we, and she was very straightforward and said it's a fabulous topic. And we'll have to do it very well, exceptionally well, in order to communicate its value to naysayers. And it was a really important moment for me because it encouraged me to go in directions that perhaps were not popular at the time. By the way, the dissertation got done, the book came out, articles flowed, everything worked out. And I am reminded of the value of taking Beth's advice, especially when you face a risky proposition. Beth's mentoring of me did not stop in 1991. After I graduated, she just continued to do more of the same and does continue to do more of the same. And as I think about how Beth does that, one of the things that I most covet is that Beth has for almost 40 years told me my voice matters, that the work I do matters, and that I as a human being matter. And this is in a context where we often disagree substantively and politically. So this is a valued friendship because of that space. It's an incredible gift, Beth, and I want to thank you here in front of all of your friends and colleagues for that gift. I've convinced myself that I'm Beth's favorite former student, and I'm pretty sure of that, right, Beth? Do you want to give a thumbs up for that, what I've convinced myself of? But I know her contributions to many graduate students are profound. In fact, it goes across generations, and I think of this as an incredible legacy that Beth has given freely. My experience is not unique. It might be a story I tell, but there are generations of students that Beth has mentored without regard for credit or loyalty. For those of you that aren't embedded in academia, the professoriate's ego is often unmatched. Beth has done this kind of mentoring without ego and more interested in being an effective counselor and support and kind of collaborator in the world of ideas. Now, intertwined with this scholarship and mentoring, Beth has done a lot of institutional work that I'm sure others will talk about, including helping build feminist studies, back then women's studies, directing the McNair program, serving as chair twice. It's kind of an amazing record of creating institutional space through service work on those fronts. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that in every realm, her scholarship, her mentoring, and her administrative and service work, in my mind, Beth sets the pace by pushing boundaries and building institutions in ways that make space for others in general, but particularly for those who have been historically excluded. I say all the time to people that much of my success has a lineage in my connection to Beth and her influence. And I know that's not unique to me. There are decades of graduate students, too many undergrads to count, that would say the same. I'm emphasizing this intergenerational impact because I want to conclude with a story that I alluded to earlier. A few months ago, Beth and I were talking while taking a walk on the beach in Carpinteria. And I asked her this question: what was it like to be one of 2 out lesbian professors in the UC system when I was in graduate school, way back when? As we were walking, she stopped, she paused, she turned and looked me in the face. We've all had that look from Beth where she breathes out and like, all right. And after a moment of contemplation, she gave a one-word answer, and that answer was lonely. And Beth, I don't know how much you know, that just was a sucker punch for me on that beach. I understood what Beth was saying. Many people who go first are in lonely spaces that define them as a first and treat them as such. I want to thank Beth for all the times, Beth, you've gone first. First for me, first for others, and first for the field. Many of us in this Zoom room today have benefited from your willingness to go first. Now, Beth's Lifetime Achievement Awards and accolades, which will be talked about a lot today, are very important, great, well-deserved. But for me, the many contributions Beth's made to helping me and so many others achieve as people and professionals is the real gift. I want to thank you, Beth, for making it less lonely for people like me, and for doing so by creating space for future generations. I'm pleased I'm not the first. I know we're better off because you created that space, and there are now generations that bind us together. As a certified member of Team Beth, as I call it, I deeply appreciate that you made my life and the lives of so many others better, much better. For that, my dear friend, I think that is your main legacy. Now, I don't tell Beth this often, but I want to say in front of everybody, Beth, I love you and I respect you. And I'm going to get in the habit of acknowledging that more frequently. So my time's up. I'm going to say over and out. And Beth, I will see you on May 26th to ask you another question.
Thank you so much, Val. Our next speaker is California Senator Monique Limon.
Thank you, Jane. I very much appreciate it. And, today I'm really not here just as a senator. I'm here as someone who has a very special relationship with Beth. She's my former supervisor, but she's my ongoing friend, supporter, and mentor. I had the pleasure of meeting her when I first started working at UCSB. I worked in the graduate division, and Beth was very involved with the NSF AGEP grant. And that grant was interesting and it was complicated at times, but that relationship actually flourished into me working with Beth very closely for almost, I think, 9 years with the McNair Scholars Program. Beth brought me on board even though she was really undecided who she was going to bring on board. And she brought me on board to work with her with the McNair Scholars Program. And what came out of the McNair program was not only incredible as a program, but truly my relationship with Beth and the opportunity that I had to work with someone like Beth, who taught me so much and who really was instrumental. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Beth has been so instrumental in so many aspects of my life. I don't know that I would have run for school board if it wasn't for the opportunities that Beth gave me. And I don't know that I would have run for assembly. So when I think about women who are in public office, I oftentimes talk about Beth because Beth knew that it was a difficult process for women. And her and I traveled both the professional world at UCSB through McNair, but also the non-state world, as we call it. And we had highs and lows. And my journey to public office was not an easy one. It wasn't always paved with silver platters and opportunities. And sometimes, you know, my deepest moments of remembering Beth are those where we had some of our lows, where I would go to her and say, I don't know what happened. This isn't working out. Whether it was public criticism or whether it was an endorsement that didn't go well. And so this was someone who I think also practiced what we so often preach. Creating opportunities sometimes require for us to think non-traditionally. They require for us to really say, as women, we want to see other women move forward and we want to uplift women. But it's sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes inconvenient and sometimes not ideal for the workplace. But Beth taught me and she continues to be an inspiration because she gave me a chance to do a job, but also get involved in the community. And that doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen for people who have to work full time. And so now, as in return, I have two people who work with me who are in public office. And I have to tell you that I always say, Beth did it for me. I have to do it for other women, no matter how hard, how inconvenient, non-traditional it is. Beth is the person that did it for me. I was a school board member because of Beth. I was an assembly member because of Beth, and that has led me to becoming the state senator. I also remember just the fond moments we had working together. Fond is one of the words. We also probably could identify other words. Working with the McNair program together on renewal of grants, traveling with students, searching for additional funding, and then at times our most favorite thing to do, discussing what we were going to feed students, and who knew that that would be so difficult and hard at times. But through the highs and through the lows, I also remember some of the more challenging times that we had at UCSB, and specifically when the Ivy shooting happened. Beth was the first person that I talked to, probably about 5 a.m. I don't even know what time it was after the shooting. And we both knew that something terrible had happened for our community, but we also didn't know if our students that we worked with through the McNair program were okay. And so in the early hours of Saturday after the Friday night shooting, Beth was that first person to talk to me, to guide me, to console me, but also to put a plan in action to make sure that our students were safe. So I share all of this because Beth is so much to so many of us. And for me, I am just unbelievably blessed and grateful to have Beth in my life. She still listens to me when we go to our lunches and we meet up. They're not as regular and frequent as I would like, but Beth continues to be such an incredible support. And she is an example that I talk about statewide and across the country of what it takes to uplift women and ensure that women move into leadership positions. She's practiced this through her work with the Women's Political Committee, but she's practiced it in her everyday life. When you talk to people who have been, who have worked under her through graduate and PhD programs, when you talk to the McNair scholars, Beth is that person who helps us, who uplifts us, who asks us the hard questions, who makes sure that we've thought about a lot of the things that may come before us as we move through our path. I'm grateful that I've had the time to work with her as long as I did. Always sad that I don't get to work with her and I don't get to just pop in her office and ask her what she thinks. But I know that she is a lunch date away from really still continuing to be that mentor, my supporter, and just a friend. Beth, I am so lucky, and I mean it in so many ways, to have had you in my life. I mean it when I say that I don't think I would be where I'm at if it wasn't for your mentorship, your friendship, and your support, and your guidance. You are incredible. And for the first, I am the first woman of color, first person of color to serve in this role for the state Senate. And you have taught me so much. So from a first generation Latina to my incredible friend, supporter, boss, Jewish LGBTQ woman, thank you for everything you have done for me and for others.
Thank you so much, Monique. Our next speaker is Ellen Broidy.
Apologies, please, for reading my remarks. I'm coming off of COVID, but not coming off of COVID brain, unfortunately. For 9 years, ending in 2019, I had the absolute honor of working with Beth at the McNair Scholars Program. It was hands down the best job I ever had in my close to 40-year career at the University of California, and Beth was the best and most supportive supervisor with whom I have ever worked. Established in memory of African-American physicist and Challenger astronaut Dr. Ronald E. McNair, the McNair Scholars Program supports the academic achievement of students from groups traditionally underrepresented in higher education. Now, I can't speak to what McNair is at other academic institutions, but at UCSB, thanks to Dr. Beth's skills, passion, and commitment, it was an island of support and sanity for some exceptional students trying to find their way at a university and aiming for graduate school and careers in academia. The kids, and given our advanced ages, they truly were like our kids, if not our grandkids. These kids found a haven and a home at McNair, where their academic aspirations were nurtured and their unique and quirky personalities encouraged to grow and develop. Dr. Beth is an amazing combination of advisor, teacher, mentor, and confidant. Students sought her counsel when they encountered difficulties with their faculty, trusted her with details about their often complicated, even traumatic personal lives, and the challenges they faced as students of color at a majority white institution. They also unfailingly rushed to her door, joyously clutching acceptance letters from top-ranked graduate programs, making sure she was the very first to know of their great good fortune, or, in many fewer instances, stood tearfully outside her door, waiting to tell her that they'd received yet another rejection letter. Dr. Beth was there for each and every one of them, with a reassuring word, solid practical advice, a box of tissues, a piece of chocolate, and when necessary, a symbolic kick in the butt. Our students knew that her door was both figuratively and literally always open, and whether they were confronting a hurdle in their research or couldn't find a place to live, Beth always seemed to know the right thing to say. Even when she could not wave her magic wand and make disappointment or rejection disappear, somehow just being in her presence made even the most dejected feel heard and supported, and most importantly, willing to head out and try again. I could easily take up the rest of the program regaling you with tales of Dr. Beth and McNair, but I'll leave you with 3 that to my mind get at the essence of who Beth Schneider is and the profound impact she had on the lives of these special young people. The first is an example of a gentle but definitely deserved kick in the butt. Soon after I got to McNair, one of the senior cohort arrived in Beth's office with the news of a grad school rejection. He didn't get into Berkeley, a dream he had nurtured for years. He defiantly announced, No Berkeley, no graduate school. Beth heard him out, and then in a calm and reassured Dr. Schneider voice said, "You got into Harvard. You're going to graduate school." A few years later, we admitted a young woman into the program who was going through some serious and tragic changes in her life. Her mother was terminally ill, and she had to commute to UCSB from Los Angeles. She also appeared to be without academic direction or purpose. And I'm ashamed to say that others of us on the staff were ready to give up on her. Her assignments were frequently late, or when she did manage to get something in on time, woefully incomplete. Dr. Beth took a totally different approach to this young woman. She saw promise where the rest of us saw only chaos, and set about to help her maximize her strengths. Beth created assignments that not only allowed the student to explore and identify her real interests, but come into her own as a budding scholar. This lost young woman is now in an MD program, a place I'm certain she never would have landed had it not been for Beth's timely and sensitive intervention. I'm firmly convinced that Beth gave her back her life. Lastly, standing in front of a class eager to get through the syllabus, we sometimes forget that we're dealing with young people who are struggling as hard with, quote, the facts of life as they are with their studies. Beth is keenly aware of that. On numerous occasions, the topic of an office hour conversation veered from how well a particular assignment was going to the personal challenges our students face as they struggle to navigate their place in a world not designed with them in mind. Whether it was unreciprocated romantic feelings, dealing with difficult roommates, or finding strategies for speaking with parents who could not quite grasp why anyone would want to study history and not engineering, and often leave California to do so, Beth was consistently there with comforting words and sound advice. I always knew something positive was about to happen when Beth said this simple sentence to a student in distress: "Come on, take a walk with me." Those walks were magic, and just a further reflection of how Dr. Beth created an environment at McNair where we all, students and staff alike, could strive to be our very best and accomplish our wildest dreams. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you, Ellen. A couple of you have asked whether we're recording today's event, and we are. So we'll ask Beth's permission at some point about whether we can share, but Beth will in fact have a copy of the video and also a copy of the chat. I am now going to introduce Lois Phillips, who is joining us via a pre-recorded video.
Hello, Beth and everyone. My name is Lois Phillips, and I wish I could have been with you all today for your retirement party, Beth. As a UCSB professor with a distinguished career, I'm sure that your colleagues and students can and will be able to speak to your scholarly accomplishments, important administrative assignments, and your leadership roles at UCSB. I'd like to remind people that you demonstrated your commitment to civic engagement as a board member, co-chair of the AIDS Counseling and Assistance Program, and also as a member of the Parent Council of the Open Alternative School. I can't imagine how you found time or made the time to juggle all of those diverse roles. After retiring, you became a public engagement commissioner for the city of Goleta. I can only imagine how much you're contributing to the commission's discussions and strategic plans. I would like to speak to and thank you for your participation as a longtime dynamic board member of the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. Somehow you navigated the many demands of your academic career and family life to make time to participate as a board president as well as a board member for many years. You joined the Women's Political Committee in 1990, and you were president for 3 years, from 2008 to 2011. You helped to grow the organization, and you brought to the task an appreciation for the larger community and the need to diversify the board. You cultivated younger leaders to take what they learned to become more involved in local politics, participating in the WPC's Candidate Development Committee for at least 10 years. And you've been the archivist for the WPC forever. Paula Lopez, who is the WPC president right now, often speaks about the prior presidents as being inspirational role models and mentors. I imagine that it's a point of pride for you that many former board members and presidents were appointed to or elected to local, regional, and state leadership roles. I can speak personally about our years of planning the SBWPC's President's Circle Luncheon, which showcased political speakers and elected officials who were endorsed by the organization. The planning occurred with an ad hoc structureless committee, this time with 17 other members. We became co-chairs of the President's Circle annual luncheon event, likely by default, but nevertheless, we worked closely together to maintain momentum over 6 months to facilitate what became a sold-out event, March 31st. During the annual planning process, I found you to be a strong force. For instance, you ensured that before we even thought about appropriate speakers, that we had substantive discussions about the current hot issues as seen through a feminist lens. And you wanted to make sure that the outreach effort included friends who were non-members. You and I agreed we didn't want to just preach to the choir. We want to replenish those of us who are older and retiring with a younger generation of feminists who will march, lobby, work on feminist campaigns, seek political appointments, or even consider running for office. Beth, the Women's Political Committee, is one of the most successful member-driven PACs in the country because of you and those former presidents you've mentored. On another note, I bet many people don't know that you've been involved in art workshops for years, developing your talents by studying different media. As someone in your classes, I'm very impressed by your talent and your willingness to experiment in producing colorful and creative paintings. This day has been set aside, Beth, to acknowledge your many contributions to academia as a scholar, but should also acknowledge your contributions to the community of Santa Barbara and Goleta as a community leader and activist. Now that you have more free time, I wish you continued pleasure found in spending time with your family, friends, and pursuing your interest in the arts. I hope you enjoy the accolades because you deserve every single one and more. Feminist activism brought us together, but I certainly hope that our friendship continues to evolve. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, we have a couple of moments when we're going to invite the women of the day to give some comments. And I just want to say before I turn it over to you, Beth, that I'm so struck by how many times in planning this event you said to me, will anyone even have anything to say? Who will even come to this? Maybe, are you sure we should really do this? The humility that I just want to note that in addition to all of these accomplishments, Beth also moves through the world with profound humility. And I'm so glad we carried forward with this event today.
I'm unmuted, so I must speak. Okay, so, you never know what to expect. And I'm very tearful because what everyone has said has really gone, to my heart. And you just take a deep breath, and if it wasn't me, I could just cry in peace. But there are a few things I do want to say. Everyone who spoke, everyone who spoke, it was really wonderful. Who are smart people. They're smart colleagues, they're smart graduate students, they're smart McNair people. And I humbly don't take credit for everything that's happened to them, whatever they may say, because that feels unfair to them. On the other hand, I do feel like I was there at times and places where I needed to be. So, and what does that mean? Let me just say that when I became the second woman, tenure track woman in a sociology department, that was, I guess that was probably 90% men. It was a great shock to my system because I had been, how shall I say, in Northampton in lesbian world for 6 years. And I didn't talk to a man probably at all. So I come to sociology, and except for the one man on my committee. And I come to sociology, and it seems to me we ought to have some more women. And so one of my goals in life, and it took me more than one chairship to do it, was to have more women. But thankfully also, I had Peter Nardi and Ken Plummer and Barry Adam and Martin Levine, who were my guys. And they were my guys from the ASA. They were my guys from what was called at the time the Gay Caucus. And they were all academics, and they were all managing somehow to thrive. And it was very important to me that I had them. They were, yes, they were good guys. They were great guys in supporting the career. I have a bunch of things to say about some of my work, but I'll save it. The other thing that I want to say is this half of the program has provided a kind of spectrum of sort of the many things that I have been doing. And I have tried to think about this, and there's probably a psychologist in the room right now thinking about this, but this whole question of loneliness is a real thing. Coming to UCSB was a very lonely thing to do. And being someplace where not only were there all these guys, but I was a Jewish lesbian, what can I say, at a funny time in a funny place to be a Jewish lesbian. And I was a first generation student. So there were kinds of ways in which the loneliness provoked me. And that's all I think I'll say about it. The loneliness provoked me to get involved in things I might otherwise not have done. And that includes the community political work. Without the community political work, I would have had a hard time surviving. It really helped me. So in addition to the projects, the multiple projects, the Women's Studies Project, and the beginnings of the AIDS epidemic and the teaching that I came to do, there was that sort of motivational force to never quite be lonely, to never quite be without a project that at the moment felt completely meaningful to me. And I think that's all I want to say about it now. I do want to talk, and I think I will later, prompted by something Jane told me earlier, to say something about AIDS and its monumental effect on my career and what it did to my career. But I think I'll save that for a different moment. So I think Jane has a few minutes if somebody wants to speak, or am I hijacking the program, Jane, by saying that?
You're hijacking the program.
Okay.
It is my turn to speak, and
okay.
Then we'll move on. We have a few more people on the program, and then we'll open up for open mic. So I met Beth 30 years ago in 1993 as a student in her undergraduate Sociology 159 LG course. The LG stood for lesbian and gay. And I want to put this moment in historical context, sort of like Val did. So queer studies was in its very infancy at this time, and it certainly wasn't yet impacting the social sciences very much. It was still being owned by the humanities, mostly white gay men in the humanities. And AIDS panic was still in full force. There weren't any reliably effective HIV meds at this time. Protease inhibitors had not yet been invented. And Beth Schneider was teaching packed courses in gay and lesbian studies and sociology of AIDS. She was well known across UCSB and within the discipline of sociology for being an out lesbian feminist scholar who welcomed students interested in feminist and gay and lesbian studies. So of course, Beth was overwhelmed with more graduate students than any single faculty member should ever take on, which I now know now that I am one. And yet she was a savvy, steady, and generous advisor for many of us, for all of us. And when I met Beth in 1993, she was also working with Nancy Stoller on a groundbreaking edited volume called Women Resisting AIDS, Feminist Strategies of Empowerment. And the book was later published in 1995. And this book centered women in the story of the pandemic and how the pandemic was spreading and who was doing the labor in the AIDS organizations that were fighting back. But I think even more importantly, the book asserted AIDS as a feminist issue and feminist strategies as essential to HIV/AIDS prevention and care. As Beth and Nancy wrote in their introduction, women's skills and activities are at the heart of any strategy to fight AIDS. Women do the work of holding families together, caring for the sick, healing the unhappy, dealing with grief, and teaching the young. Beth's attention to the gendered dimensions of the pandemic in this book and in her other writing and in our Soc of AIDS class that I took around this time now feels to me especially prescient as we've witnessed the COVID-19 pandemic expose yet again the reliance on women to do the work of sustaining human life, to take care of the kids when the schools close, to take care of the sick when the hospitals are full, and so forth. And years later, in 1998, Beth co-edited another groundbreaking book, this one with Peter Nardi, who's here today, titled Social Perspectives in Lesbian and Gay Studies. The first sentence of this book's description kind of says it all. This comprehensive reader brings a social science perspective to an area hitherto dominated by the humanities. Indeed, while queer studies was anchored in the humanities, Beth was among the few forerunners in sociology to push the discipline to take sexual identity seriously as a unit of analysis that could exist outside of the sociology of deviance, which is where studies of homosexuality were living in sociology. I believe that this book, along with Beth's tireless mentorship of graduate students like myself, who were drawn to what we now call the sociology of sexualities, is one of the key ingredients that made queer sociology possible, and that also made the development of the sociology of sexuality section in ASA possible. But another thing that made queer sociology possible is also Beth's doing, and that was her tenure as editor of Gender and Society. So when Beth took over as editor of Gender and Society, which for those of you who don't know, this is the top ranked gender studies journal in the United States, based in the US, it was almost like a sounding call went out to the growing ranks of young sociologists who could imagine that this journal might actually now publish their research, and Beth did. Gender and Society became a home for emergent queer sociological scholarship. And later in 2009, as Val mentioned, Beth and I co-edited a special issue on the reaches of heteronormativity that asked feminist sociologists to engage with a concept, normativity, that had emerged out of literary scholarship, but held a lot of untapped usefulness for the social sciences. In our conversations leading up to today's event, Beth shared with me that even when she wrote about women generally, as in her work on sexual harassment in the workplace or her work on women in the HIV/AIDS movement, people responded with the most excitement about the fact that she had included lesbians in particular. She was a sociologist writing about lesbians at a time of profound lesbian invisibility. Beth told me recently, I realized studying lesbians was my place in life. And thank the goddess that Beth had this realization, because her work helped to carve out lesbian studies. And I know that the journal Signs has a call for lesbian studies now, a special issue in the fall, because guess what subject is back in style? Lesbian studies. Beth's work and career is like this. It is trailblazing, but also timeless in its broad political and ethical stakes. Beth has chosen her projects carefully and approached being an academic in a holistic way that always made room for community organizing. While many scholars make the academy their entire lives, Beth has long been politically active in LGBT, AIDS, feminist organizations in Santa Barbara, from serving on the board of Pacific Pride Foundation to chairing the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. And this is in addition to becoming a mother later in life at an age that I am now, when I'm so exhausted, I can't even imagine having a baby. So as an advisor, moving back to that, Beth was tender and caring, but also professional. She found the perfect space that I think the best of feminist faculty learned to inhabit, a balance between care and attention to her students' complex humanity, consciousness of the power imbalance between faculty and students, and a refusal to drown in the emotional labor that students often expect of women faculty. And I now know that I learned how to be a feminist professor from Beth. And I ask myself often, as I interact with my graduate students, what would Beth do? I need to get a "What would Beth do" bracelet. Beth served on the PhD committees of over 30 graduate students working in gender and sexuality studies, chairing over half of those committees. The great majority of these students were women who received tenure-track faculty positions at top research universities. I've heard from many of Beth's former students that they did not know how exceptional it was to receive such wholehearted support for feminist research in the sociology department until they went on to receive their own jobs. Beth made queer feminist sociology feel so urgent, so central to the core concerns of sociology, that some of us thought this was simply the nature of the discipline. When I was living in LA and teaching for 18 years at UC Riverside, Beth and I would meet once a year at a deli halfway between our homes, where Beth listened as I described my challenges as a department chair. She, once taught me how to write a dissertation, and then later provided advice about how to negotiate with the administration, with deans, how to get promoted to full, how to chair a department, how to be a scholar and a parent at the same time. And I know she provides this loving guidance for so many others, as we've already heard today. Beth is a lifelong mentor, and now we live in the same town. And so in addition to her professional advice, Beth is now teaching me how to retire with gusto, to travel, to make art, to paint, to serve the community, and to be with friends and family. And again, I find myself feeling deeply, wildly grateful to her for her wisdom about how to live a feminist life. Thank you, Beth. And I think I'm supposed to introduce the next speaker. Let me transition into that mode. Oh, we will now hear from Maria Charles, who has sent a video.
Hi, everybody. Since I'm in a faraway time zone, I'm sending this short video to help celebrate and honor Beth Schneider. Beth and I overlapped in the sociology department for just a little over a decade, but I've been aware of her intellectual legacy for a lot longer. When I had the opportunity to join UCSB's sociology department, I was humbled at the prospect of working alongside some of the country's leading gender scholars. I knew Beth as part of a small group who helped bring the intersectional study of gender and sexualities first to the cutting edge of our discipline, and eventually more and more into its mainstream. As her department colleague, I came to appreciate Beth's direct, no-nonsense style, her mentorship, and her deep commitment to making the department and the world a better place, including through her visionary leadership as PI and director of McNair, and through 2 stints as department chair. I learned more about Beth's role in the department's history as I was organizing our 50th anniversary celebration in 2015. Beth was not only a pioneer in the study of sexualities, she was also a pioneer woman academic. In a 2015 interview, she remarked, "When I arrived in 1981, there were so few female faculty on the campus that the women faculty used to get together socially. These get-togethers ultimately led to the creation of a women's studies program, which is today the Department of Feminist Studies. Although the women's studies program was a victory for women across the campus, gender remained largely absent from the core sociology curriculum, until Beth and others began to push for a new graduate research area, which is today called Gender and Sexualities, and is consistently ranked as one of the top programs in the country." Thank you, Beth, for 40 years of feminist leadership and for more than a decade of friendship. And thank you, Jane, for organizing this event.
Thank you to Maria. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Verda Taylor. We're going to unmute Verda. Verda, you are muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Thanks, Jane. I want to apologize for reading, but I decided after consulting Val on text that I would be a little honest with why, because Beth has been so central to my recovery. I am recovering from a total knee replacement, which went awry, which I probably never would have lived through without Beth's friendship, love, and support. And I'm currently still in the process of tapering off that evil drug, oxycodone. So I'm going to read my presentation because it was all I could do to drag myself out of bed this morning, because mornings are very hard when you're going through this. And I decided I should just put it out there because this is one of the things Beth has been the person I always call when I am most in trouble. Thank you, Beth. So I met Beth in the early 1980s at a Sociologist for Women in Society event at the ASA meetings in New York. We've gone round and round about the exact year and location, but what I recall most vividly is that she was wearing a rather feminine purple flowered dress and had long curly hair. This at a time when Lila and I were clad in the uniform of lesbian feminists, pants, men's neckties, fry boots, and of course, I had a buzz cut. I had heard Beth speak on panels at what was then called the Gay Caucus, but this was the first time we had actually spoken, and it was the highlight of my meetings to finally meet this woman whose writings on lesbians were appearing in all of the feminist publications at a time, as Jane pointed out, when there was so much lesbian invisibility. You see, Beth was my role model. I'm not sure she ever really knew this. She was at that time everything that I aspired to. So meeting her was this tremendous highlight. And she was literally everything I aspired to, except maybe the flowered dress. She was a trailblazer, an out lesbian, writing about things that I had been told we couldn't write about at all, or I wouldn't be tenured. As an assistant professor who was not even tenured yet, here was Beth writing about topics like sexual harassment, lesbian discrimination in the workplace, AIDS activism, and the feminist movement. Meanwhile, as an assistant professor at the Ohio State University, I had been warned that if I published a paper on coming out as a lesbian that I presented at the SSSP meetings, I would be denied tenure. I am not surprised that so many of us here today have talked about the tremendous influence Beth has had on our lives. It's difficult to put into words how important Beth's early publications on sexuality and feminism were at a time when it took incredible courage just to write about LGBTQ topics, much less to openly identify professionally as a lesbian. Younger people who were her students like Jane and Val have talked about that, but I was her peer, and it was equally important, if perhaps even more, to a group of us who were her peers who had really been held out, and Beth was out there in front. Initially, I had been even afraid to be seen attending the meetings of ASA's Lesbian and Gay Caucus after that lecture from my department chair. But Beth dragged me out of the professional closet like she did so many of us by putting me on the program, volunteering me to replicate Joan Huber's study of discrimination against lesbian and gay sociologists in the profession, and inviting me to co-edit a special issue on gender and social movements after she was appointed editor of Gender and Society. Beth has had a truly stellar career, both in the profession and on UCSB's campus. In addition to serving as one of the founding editors of Sociology's top feminist journal, she won 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards for her scholarship and activism in the field of sexualities, the Simon and Gagnon Award, and another for her work on the sociology of AIDS. She served as president of the Pacific Sociological Association, among numerous other elected offices in the PSA and the ASA. I can't even begin to list her service in the ASA. It was so important in that period for her to be that visible. And she was the first woman chair of UCSB's sociology department. Beth leaves a remarkable legacy. UCSB's sociology department, as Maria noted, has consistently ranked among the top 5 in sex and gender by US News and World Reports, thanks in part to Beth's bold and persistent leadership and the work she did with the other feminist scholars that she and Sarah were so busy hiring and bringing into the department in those years. You heard how male it was when they first came. During her 2 terms as department chair, she hired Tristan Bridges, Jennifer Earle, Jeff Raymond, Bill Robinson, Windance Twine, Hannah Wold, and me. And in her positions as chair, associate dean of the Division of Social Sciences, and director of the McNair Scholar Program, Beth's deep and abiding commitment to feminism, to LGBTQ queer studies, and to racial and social justice has made a tremendous difference in the composition and really the very climate of the sociology department and the campus. We are really among the most diverse sociology departments in the United States, and recently it was discovered actually on this campus that we are clearly the most diverse. And a lot of this we owe to Beth's struggle in those early years. Her teaching and student mentoring have been recognized nationally by SWS's Feminist Mentoring Award, as well as by UCSB's Distinguished Teaching Award, Outstanding Graduate Mentoring Award, and you saw earlier the Margaret T. Getman Service to Students Award. And Beth's graduate students, many of whom are here today, are making path-breaking contributions to the study of gender and sexuality. Her legacy continues. There really are no words to express my gratitude for the impact that Beth has had on my career. Jane emphasized that we should talk more about Beth than ourselves, but I think each of us has found it important to talk about ourselves because of the impact she has had on each of our lives. But there are no words to describe the impact she had on me by inviting me to that first meeting of the Gay Caucus. Almost 2 decades later, when Beth was appointed chair of UCSB's sociology department, she hired me on the faculty, and we'd been feminist colleagues and close friends for nearly 40 years now. And I treasure her friendship. In the past year, after another challenging orthopedic surgery, a total knee replacement, I came to realize that Beth is one of the first people I call when I need advice and support, even after all of these years. The move to UCSB forever changed the trajectory of my career, freeing me to do research on LGBTQ topics. And many of you know that work. And some of you may know, Lila and I wrote a book on drag queens that was published shortly after we moved to UCSB. We even dared to bring our research subjects to campus to perform in my introductory sociology class in Campbell Hall, something we never could have done at Ohio State. Perhaps nothing better explains how much it meant for us to get out of Ohio than the protest that occurred 2 weeks ago in Columbus. Neo-Nazi, white supremacist skinheads displaying swastikas and chanting "There will be blood" and "No transgenders" on our streets threatened people attending a brunch hosted by drag queens as a fundraiser for an LGBTQ youth organization, which, by the way, earned twice the amount of money they ever expected to earn after that display. Beth, thanks from the bottom of our hearts for all you've done for so many of us, both individually and collectively, by dedicating your career and your life to fighting the good fight. Knowing Beth, I think it's pretty safe to say that we ain't seen nothing now yet, and we need you more than ever now. So congratulations on your retirement, and I look forward to many more years together, making trouble together as feminists. And we love you.
Thank you so much, Berta. We have a treat of a video next from a group of people called Lars. I was a member of Lars, and you will soon find out what that is.
Hi, everybody. This is Matt Muchler, and I used to be a student of Beth Schneider's at UC Santa Barbara. Now I'm a faculty member at California State University, Dominguez Hills, and I also still work here at APLA, AIDS Project Los Angeles Health. Beth, I want to thank you so much for your mentorship over the years. It really meant so much to me to have someone to look up to and someone who really cared about my work there at UCSB, both undergrad and grad, for me. And particularly with our work with Lars, this was a really special group focused on AIDS research that Beth pulled together and mentored us to do some work on HIV research. And I've been doing that work ever since. Couldn't have done it at all without Beth's support. You know, one of the things I kind of grappled with was remembering what Lars was. I couldn't really remember what it stood for, actually. I knew it was a research group. Let me see if I can get any help with that. Hey, Glenn Hughes.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Hey, just trying to figure out, I couldn't remember what Lars meant.
Well, what I remember is, remember Joe Rollins?
Yeah.
Joe said he always wanted to have a group named Lars for some reason. And we all thought, okay, that could work. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons I went to UCSB was because Beth was focused on not only teaching and researching about HIV/AIDS, but in doing so, also creating compassion for people with HIV and AIDS. And I think Lars provided that for me, like a kind of third space to reflect on the emotional aspects of doing HIV/AIDS work. And it meant a lot to me to connect with other people around that.
But it's funny, we still don't know what it meant, what it stood for. Let's see if we can get any more help on this.
Good evening, gentlemen. How are you? Nice to see you both. How are you?
Hey, Joe.
Oh, we were just trying to remember what Lars meant, and then you suddenly just appeared in our Zoom call.
Lars, here's my memory of that tale. I think I was watching old Rhoda reruns, and her husband's name was Lars. And so when we were talking about what to name the group, I had this ridiculous inspiration that something needed to be named Lars. And someone far more interesting and intelligent than myself came up with looking for AIDS research support. And all of these years, I have given Glenn credit for that. However, it may have been Beth. I don't know. I remember the group as being a lifeline to sanity for me. As you're both aware, I was trained as a political scientist, which no one should ever do. It's just not a good plan. But because of Beth's kindness and warmness and generosity of spirit and her willingness to step into the fray, she really kept me afloat during one of the worst times of my life. And so Lars meant a great deal to me.
Well, likewise, we were just talking about, how Beth helped create and support this little cohort of people who wanted to do research on HIV at UCSB, a place that really didn't have a medical center, didn't have a lot of support for that. But somehow, because I think she was so passionate about it and, the sociology of AIDS class was such a groundbreaking course and so important. It helped bring us all together. And now that we've all had some careers and a little bit of time, I think we know how special that is. So really want to thank Beth so much for that.
I think it made me braver as a scholar activist, and that's a tribute to Beth, but also to the folks who were in the group.
I've been thinking about this conversation for the last few days, and on the one hand, I want to be so grateful to Beth, and I want to wish her all of the pleasures and rest that retirement should bring to her. And at the same time, I also want to say, get out there and keep kicking shit up, because it's not done yet.
That's for sure, that's for sure, isn't it?
Cheers to that, yeah.
Maybe we can figure out a way to reunite someday.
That would be lovely. And Beth, mwah.
Yes. We love you, love you, love you. I guess I'll do a kiss you. Love you, Beth. Have fun.
All right. We're not done yet, Beth. Our next speaker is Danielle Hidalgo.
Hi, Beth. Hi, everybody. Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for organizing this. So I did write something out. I'm going to kind of be reading from it, but yeah, I'll start and then I might say some other things. So I met Beth in 2006 during a campus visit to UC Santa Barbara. As a graduate student in New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina had recently forced me out, and I needed to quickly find a new place where I could reasonably finish my PhD. So I used a final trip to make a decision about where I would officially land. And after the visit, I vividly remember telling my grandma June about Beth. Her kindness and her support really stood out. She seemed genuinely interested in the research I was taking on, which was different. It was, it wasn't typical sociology. And most importantly at the time, I felt like I had someone who would be in my corner for the duration. And really, Beth absolutely was. Without getting into all the gory details, while on the horrid post-2008 job market, Beth stuck by my side for 7 long years. And as y'all know, I can't tell you how many letters, how much time this meant, but it was really significant and extensive. And we had to organize these seemingly endless deadlines for these applications in monthly tables. That's how much work we were talking about together. During all of this, she was beyond patient, admittedly worried, and we talked about that a lot, and always kind. I know for a fact that her ongoing support kept me going for all of those really difficult years. I also have to say how much I learned from Beth over the years. She taught me how to mentor, which translates to really, truly, lovingly supporting students and also honoring my boundaries and honoring the boundaries of students, right? So not overworking ourselves, taking care of myself. I'm reminded of her lessons a ton. I've been reminded of these lessons so much over the years, perhaps especially during the COVID teaching that so many of us took on. And the struggles that we've been seeing students navigating for all these years. Beth's lessons have really helped through all of it. So that is to say that I'm so lucky to know Beth, and I'm so happy to celebrate her this weekend. I've been singing her praises to anyone who will listen. I mean, it started with my Grandma June. I remember that first conversation I had with Grandma June when I got back from my campus visit, and I'm not planning on stopping singing her praises. Happy retirement, Beth. You are absolutely the best mentor I ever had. Truly, you are. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Our next speaker is Fatima Suarez. Did you all hear me? Hello? Yes? Okay. We are now moving to Fatima Suarez.
She looks frozen.
Ah, okay. I'm looking for Fatima's window and not seeing them. Maybe we lost them. All right, maybe what we'll do is move on to Anna, and then we'll loop back and see if we can find Fatima.
Anna, where are you?
Hi, everybody. Hi, Beth. It's so good to see your face. So I'm one of, as many of us are, one of Beth's many graduate students over the years. So I think we've heard a lot about different overlapping aspects of Beth's mentorship, and I want to focus on one that we haven't heard as much about. So I came to UC Santa Barbara as an accepted graduate student in 2015, and I was coming out of a policy background, and I was looking to study policy and politics in sociology with a feminist lens, and it wasn't clear to me that this was something I was going to be allowed to do. So I've been interested in hearing everybody else's experience about different things they thought they might not be allowed to do in sociology. Because for me, this started to turn around when I met Beth at the reception that weekend, where I met many faculty, but Beth stood out. As many of you have gestured to, it was clear right off the bat that Beth not only had a commitment to feminism, but to feminist politics and to being able to both do scholarship and do politics and praxis. So fast forward, and you can imagine how thrilled I was to learn that Beth was going to be my first year advisor when I began at UC Santa Barbara. And over the course of the next few years, let's see, I joined the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee, thanks to Beth's urging, and worked with the candidate development team. The following year, Beth became the co-chair of my master's committee. Eventually, we also worked together on my dissertation and published together research on Black mothers and resistance to police brutality. So I've had the chance to observe Beth in a lot of different contexts, and as often happens in the course of working together in all these different ways, I also got to know Beth in a different way, which was as a mentor and as a friend. So definitely my admiration and respect for Beth grew by leaps and bounds with each year that we worked together. Absolutely, that's true. But I want to highlight particularly my profound respect for her dedication and her commitment to combining feminist scholarship and feminist praxis. I think I'm echoing some of what Danielle said here. It meant an incredible amount to me to see that somebody who was so brilliant and so successful and so kind had managed to build this career that looked so much like what I wanted for myself and which I didn't know one was going to be allowed to do. So not only was Beth active on campus in mentoring in a million different capacities and scholarship, but also in so many of her local, regional, and state communities. I also had the opportunity to observe, to take many meetings with her at her McNair Scholars Office, where she was a longtime director, and to see that the dreams that she inspired in me and supported in me were just one tiny slice of all of the students, undergraduate and graduate, who she supported over those years. So I would say in general, in my time working with Beth, I had a chance to see how dedicated she is to practicing what she preaches. And of course, I got to witness just the last glimpse of this stretch of time. Now I'm learning how many years and decades went before and learning so much of that. But I also came to understand through those years, and I have even more today, how much my work with Beth and my experience working with Beth was just one of the last links in this long chain of feminist scholars and practitioners going back. So it's profoundly meaningful to me, Beth, to hear these stories today and to understand that conversation that you had with me at the reception and Accepted Students Weekend in 2015 was one that you'd had many times in many different capacities with many different people who all continue to look up to you and respect you so much today and to love you. So thank you so much for your support for my career. I can say because of you, among others, I'm now living out my dreams, working in Texas policy analysis with abortion and contraception, and it means the world to me that you supported me getting here. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm looking to see if Fatima, yes, hello.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm sorry about that hiccup. Cox Wi-Fi is a heteropatriarchal institution. Thank you, Jane, for organizing this wonderful event for Beth and for inviting me to speak today. And I'm going to try really hard not to cry. As a scholar, mentor, and political comrade, Beth has been an emblem of feminist leadership. Thinking about all of the work, all of the labor of love Beth has done for her students, her colleagues, the discipline, the university and community over the course of her illustrious career, the image of a bridge comes to mind. As a faculty member and as a member of my dissertation committee, who I lovingly called the Holy Feminist Trinity before Tristan joined, Beth acted as a bridge between sociology and me. Beth would ask me the tough questions. And I think she likes asking the tough questions, always prefaced with a, challenging me in the best ways and providing me a space to think through my ideas. Once I walked into her office with a huge whiteboard, because I am in fact ridiculous sometimes, where I had outlined my ideas for my dissertation because a sheet of paper was not enough space. Beth was a bit surprised when she saw me waddling in with my whiteboard, but she simply smiled and she actively listened to the anxious graduate student before her. As the director of the McNair Scholars Program, Beth has acted as a bridge between undergraduate students and me. She offered me the opportunities to mentor undergraduates on their projects and be a guest speaker on several panels for students who were interested in pursuing graduate education. I really enjoyed these experiences, and I still, in fact, maintain close relationships with the undergraduate students I mentored, and that is all because of Beth's introduction. In this capacity as the director of the McNair Scholars Program, Beth was also a bridge for students who are first generation, low income, and/or who are underrepresented in doctoral programs. And the effects of this mentorship, of this bridging, will echo across generations. Beth also acted as a bridge between local feminist politics and me. She introduced me to the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee, inviting me to attend their meetings and events. It was with Beth and the SBWPC that I attended my very first public protest the Women's March in Los Angeles in January 2017, and it was a hell of a protest. And on the way back from the march, she bought me this lovely scarf that I'm wearing. It's 95 degrees here in Las Vegas, but I still thought I should wear this as a reminder of one of the moments in my life where I felt the most powerful. And as we've heard today, Beth has the special gift of inspiring us to tap into our own power. In each of these instances, Beth acted as a bridge toward empowerment, a practice I am now cultivating as a faculty member at UNLV. So Beth, in these short, simple words, I just want to thank you so much for your guidance, for your support, your friendship, and for being the feminist leader we all aspire to be. You were there for me when I needed someone in my corner the most. And for that, I will forever be grateful to you. Thank you, felicidades. I love you.
Thank you so much, Fatima. Our next speaker is Tristan Bridges.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. Hi, everyone. I teared up listening to Fatima and Anna. I can't start with the crying. I haven't even said anything yet. I was on a panel a few years ago to talk about Beth when she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Sexualities section of ASA. And Beth put me on this panel. I didn't actually probably deserve to be there. I was an assistant professor, and the faculty alongside me, some of whom are on this Zoom today, have had much longer careers than I did. But Beth said, "Hey, would you mind saying something about me?" And it felt like a big homework assignment. Jane asked me to share an abridged version of what I talked about there today. And I entitled my talk, that talk that I gave, I called the Beth Schneider Effect on the Sociology of Sexualities. I turned it into an essay also. And I just want to sort of briefly share some of what I learned in putting that talk together. Beth had an unusually influential role in the production of a subfield in sociology, the subfield that is one of the places that I call home. And I now call that unusually influential role the Beth Schneider Effect. Beth received her PhD in 1981, and that was before we had a section, members, awards, and the structure that many of us, myself included, sort of take for granted today. Growth in the field of the sociology of sexuality started after Beth's graduation. It actually really didn't take off until Beth received tenure. And if you know Beth, you know that that's no accident. I learned in putting that talk together because I went into this dusty closet in our department where we have old everything. And I asked some of the staff to help me look for some old Beth Schneider stuff. And I found her job talk poster. And I learned on that day that Beth gave her job talk in our department 16 days before I was born. And there was a job for me in this department because Beth came first, because she was here. When I put this talk together, I thought that it would be really fun to sort of quantify some of Beth's impact. And to do that, I wanted to sort of assess Beth's role in creating a subfield. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I learned. So some of those who've talked have already shared that Beth was the third editor of Gender and Society. When I went to grad school with a dream that maybe someday I would publish in this journal. And that's not uncommon. That's, I think, feminist scholars who study sociology, that's the dream. Beth was there at the beginning. And through that work, Beth created a home for just an unbelievable amount of sexuality scholarship. And so I want to just zoom in on a little bit of it to tell you a story about some of the influence of her career. I'm a sociologist and I'm a really big feminist nerd. And so it's always easier for me to tell a story with a little bit of data. And so I collected a pile of data for this talk that I gave to see if I could quantify what I called the Beth Schneider effect. I thought it would be fun to see if what I thought might be true was actually true. So I went back through every issue of Gender and Society, which started to be published in 1987. And I counted and coded all of the articles and research reports that had been published over the years through the time of my talk, which was in August of 2019. And then I also counted the numbers of those articles and reports that we might legitimately call sexuality scholarship. Beth served as editor for about 5 or 6 years. A year before she took over, Gender and Society moved from 4 issues a year to 6 issues a year, which meant that Beth had to publish more articles a year. So the work of an editor became a lot more challenging because of the journal's Beth's success. Right in the middle of Beth's editorship, Sage also started publishing another journal across the pond, Sexualities, a journal with which Beth was also connected at the same time, serving as special issues editor with Peter Nardi during the same time that she was serving as editor of the journal. One of the earliest articles in Gender and Society that had to do with sexualities was Beth's important article on workplace sexual assault. She guest edited an issue in 1994 before she took over as editor on sexual identities and communities. And that was the largest share of sexualities articles published in Gender and Society in a single year happened that year because of that special issue. And then about a decade after she edited the journal, she teamed up with Jane Ward and came back to guest edit a second special issue on heteronormativity and sexualities. And all of that work created a home for just an unbelievably, incredibly influential pile of scholarship that I've been teaching, relying on, citing my entire career. It also, putting that together, allowed me to look at the sort of proportion of articles to do with sexualities produced in Gender and Society, which is only one space to look at Beth's impact. The share of articles in that one journal that has had to do with sexualities has sort of, it's increased a little bit over time. There's still probably not enough of it. I think most of us would agree. And part of the argument I made in the presentation I gave is that the fluctuations that have happened over time are actually easily directly attributable to Beth. If you look at the shape of that trajectory of data, it sort of has 2 humps. One is during Beth's term as editor, and it started right before she took over. And the second seems to have been really launched by Jane and Beth's special issue. This is a kind of work. So these articles don't necessarily cite Beth, although she's in the acknowledgements of more articles than I can possibly imagine being in the acknowledgements of. It's not something that would show up on very many traditional metrics of scholarly influence, but this is the kind of feminist scholarly influence that I think, that I think more of us should aspire to attain. It's a model that I have tried to hold up as I try to help hold up her legacy in the department. And this is what I mean when I say she's had a Beth Schneider effect on our field. Our field's a better place for having Beth have selected it for her life's work. I miss her terribly in the department. But I'm also so grateful to have had the chance to have worked with her for a few years when I first arrived. And I'm deeply grateful to count her among my feminist comrades and friends. Thank you for everything that you've done and all that you are, Beth. You've had a Beth Schneider effect on my life, and I plan to pay this forward for the duration of my career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tristan. I feel like we all are experiencing the Beth Schneider effect right now together. Well, Beth, this is your moment to say a few more words, if you would like, before we open up for open mic. If you want to correct the record.
Well, I do. I want to correct the record, and then I have a few things to say. The record needs correcting in that I'm very proud of the fact that I also hired Kevin Whitehead, Avery Gordon, and Howard Wynant while I was chair. One's one of those 2 times. So there were a lot of people that I hired, that just to be said. But, you know, when Jane and I first talked about this, we were talking about a conference with panels and papers and so on. And it would have been a less teary effect, except when we got to dinner, I suspect. There is something I really want to say about the AIDS business that's really important to me. The study of lesbians, when I studied the lesbians, all the studies about lesbians were these sort of psychological studies. They were all studies of adjustment. They were all sort of mental health related studies. There was no sociology. And I was living in a world in which a lot of lesbian women were trying to figure out how they were going to sustain their lives, how they were going to earn a living, make a living, and how to work, essentially. And so what happened for me was that I got into the business of calling this whole business sexualization of the workplace, because it wasn't just sexual harassment, it was sort of sexual affairs, it was a sexualized workplace itself. And for me, the publications, and some of the publications that still get cited, which are now from 1981 and 82 and 83, really go to one or another of these. And it's not clear what I would have done. A lot of people ask me to keep doing work on lesbians because nobody ever says this. My dissertation was a quantitative study of 227 lesbians, and I forget how many, 128 heterosexual women. And whoever heard of that? I mean, whoever heard of a study with that many lesbians in it at that time? Okay, because all of them were really psych little studies. But I don't know what I would have done, but the community in which I was finding myself and the political affiliations I had really forced my hand when AIDS hit the gay community, the lesbian and gay community. And, you know, there I was finding myself on the program for the ASA when I was still an assistant professor, organizing a session in San Francisco about AIDS. And for me, this became this whole other business that sideswiped me in so many ways intellectually. Now, I can't complain. I did the work. I love the work. I love the people. People were dying, but it was really a move away from some of what I was doing and what I might have thought. It was also a move away, interestingly, from a study that I was doing now. And I'm reminded today with all of you here that one of the most cited articles of mine is called Political Generations in the Contemporary Women's Movement. It still gets cited as one of the first pieces on political generations in the women's movement. And it's actually a really good article. And as I listen to former graduate students who are doing entirely different work, but as I've seen with Verda's graduate students, a bunch of hers sort of built on this whole generational notion. And I'm finding today that this sort of generational notion is sort of overwhelming me a little bit, because also I really wanted to do that work. So when I think about my life, I know that part of my hanging out with the Women's Political Committee is also me living in the experiment of trying to have generational transmission of feminism. It's one of our main goals. I'm sort of living that experience rather than writing about that experience. And I feel like that's really important to say. And then finally, because I really do want to hear from whoever might want to say something at this point, retirement is a really funny thing. Retirement, the first day of an epidemic is a pandemic is even worse. I feel so not retired. My days are filled and busy and happy. And I'm happy not to be in the sociology department anymore. I mean, I'm happy to not have to hire anybody, evaluate anybody, or so on, but to have these people in my lives, the ones who remain in my lives. And, you know, I sort of love that. And this whole process, prompted by Jane, who really pushed hard, this whole process for me allowed me to review sort of what my life has been like and sort of what it looked like and what what was happening for me and who I'm grateful to. And I was so appreciative. And I just want to say the undergraduate mentoring, there were a few McNair scholars on earlier who have been remarkably successful people. There's one McNair scholar who was on a little bit before, who's probably going to be looking for a job this year, and Silvana knows who it is. Anyway, so I thank you all very much. I'm grateful to Jane again for this sort of celebration rather than this conference that we're having. It's a little, it's a little bit more emotional than any conference would have been, but thank you all. And I'm looking forward to hearing whatever it is anybody wants to jump in and say. Jane, it's back to you. I'm done.
All right, we have moved into our open mic portion for people who feel moved to speak. We already have Dana, who is Beth's cousin, is going to be up first. And Kat, who is Zoom Tech, has put into the chat some instructions about how to raise your hand if you don't know how to do that, or you can just type your name in the chat and we will call on you in order. Hi, Dana.
Good morning or afternoon if you're on the East Coast. I'm Beth's cousin, Dana. My mother, Marcy, is Beth's first cousin, and they've always been very, very close. My mother thinks of Beth as another one of her sisters. So of course, when we heard Beth was having a retirement celebration, we had to be here to celebrate with her. On behalf of Beth's family, I'm here to say how proud of her we all are. Well, Beth's had the most prolific and public career of any of our family. It is important to understand her as a person who comes from a supportive and politically active family. For many people my age, aka under 40, it is impossible to imagine a world where people cannot be out as gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, or any other sexual identity other than straight. It is also possible to imagine a world where there are no words to describe sexual harassment in the workplace. And as you just heard Beth talking about her thesis work, she's told me something about it as well. If you're under 40, it's impossible to imagine a world where people are shunned for being HIV positive or having physical or intellectual disabilities. Beth has dedicated her career to feminist political research and activism on all of these topics and so many more, but she didn't come out of nowhere. Our family has a long tradition of political consciousness and what is now called social justice. Across generations and households, we talk about all the hot topic political and social issues. I learned to take actions for change from Beth and my mother, just as they learned from their parents and aunts and uncles. One thing my mother remarked on today was Beth describing her early years in Santa Barbara as lonely. We'd never really heard Beth describe her early years in Santa Barbara as such. Excuse the clock and the train. She next said, meaning Beth, that the loneliness sort of led her to get involved in political movements, local political movements. Hearing how those early feelings about Santa Barbara led to political involvement seems so fitting. Beth's grandmother and my mother's grandmother, the grandmother was in the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, and her parents were always very politically aware people. So of course, the local politics of Santa Barbara, California, were the place for Beth to find her home on the West Coast. Beth comes from a family who knew about her work, supported her work, encouraged her work, and even taught her about the need for societal changes through political actions. If you are like me, under 40, you may have a really hard time understanding what a big deal it is for someone of my cousin's generation to have been able to do this work with the support, interest, and encouragement of her family. Now, I did not witness most of Beth's career, either because it happened before I was born or when I was very young or when I was living on the East Coast, where I still live. So what I know is both what she and I have discussed and what our family has proudly said about her work. And the word there really is pride. We are so proud of our cousin. I am confident my cousin, the academic, would tell her students to try to understand a person or event within its specific historical context. And I think I heard many people say that today. Dr. Beth Schneider comes from a family who is very, very proud of her work, from her activism against the Vietnam War, which she participated in both by herself and with her aunts and her mother and probably her father, to her research on women and HIV, to her teachings and writings on the sociology of AIDS. She did this work over many decades when the subjects were still taboo and many people could not be open with their natal family about their political beliefs, activism, or sexuality. Our family was always so proud of her. As we look back and celebrate Beth's career, try to remember at this time when all of this work was taking place. In a long and ongoing career of feminist political activism and radical sociological research, Beth has always had the love and support of her family. So on behalf of our family, Beth, everyone here today, those we missed today, we're so proud of you and we're so happy to celebrate your work and share our pride in the smartest cousin in the room.
Hi, I'm Anna DiStefano, and I have the privilege of being Beth's friend. And I just wanted to comment on something which I find rare in academics, which is a kind of authenticity within their work world and outside of their work world. Many of the things I mean, I know of Beth's work because I'm an academic as well, but I didn't know Beth at UCSB, and I didn't have the privilege of having her as a colleague or as a mentor. But I have had the privilege of being her friend, where she is, dare I say, all the things that you all have described about her, even in her friendships, even at a Dodgers game, even in a book group. So I just want to marvel at the wholeness of a person, both inside of her workplace and outside of her workplace. And I thank her for it. And Jane, thank you for doing a marvelous job in orchestrating this. Thank you very much.
Hi there. My name is Katya Armistead. I just wanted to say just a couple of things. I am so pleased to be invited to this. I am not an academic, and I love being in the space. I work at UCSB. I am an assistant vice chancellor and dean of student life. But my experience with Beth, twofold. I was a sociology major as an undergraduate. I was first generation woman of color in the 80s. Talk about lonely and confused and, you know, not prepared academically and just really lost with all my many identities, being first gen, very low income. And I was undeclared and I stumbled into sociology, sounded really interesting. And I remember so clearly being in Beth's class, and it was the first, at least I think it was the first class about the sociology of AIDS, and just being invigorated, excited to see this woman and her graduate student, who I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but just be really honest and genuine and raw. Like, we don't know where this is going. You're in this with us, and we're going to just march forward and learn as much as we can. And it was in real contrast to another sociology class that I won't say I took that was very different about the subject. And lastly, what I'll say about that is being encouraged to wear a button in solidarity of the LGBT community and being so afraid to wear it. I was like, I already got identity issues and I couldn't have articulated that. But thinking back in terms of my feelings, like, I don't want people to think that I'm gay or a lesbian. And I remember I'd put the button on and then I'd take it off. And I'd put it on and I'd take it off. And ultimately, I wore it with pride in terms of being an ally. And when I did go do my master's program several years later, because it took me a long time to have the confidence in my ability to be any kind of scholar, we had to pick an area to do more research on that you didn't identify with necessarily and wanted to learn more. And it was definitely LGBT for me. And I know that Beth really helped me as a straight woman, as a person of color, embrace many identities, cultures, and ultimately then feel better about who I am. So I thank you for that, Beth. And then secondly, how I know Beth, or I got to know Beth as a friend, a person beyond her being my professor as an undergraduate, was Noah Kai and William were friends, starting in preschool and after school care and all of that. So that I would have wonderful conversations with her and Susan. And it was very cool to move into that as friends, and not me just being in awe of like, oh, that was my professor as an undergrad. Moving forward, having some really great deep conversations about frustrations of moving forward around DEI issues on our campus and wanting to do all the things. And you would have wonderful conversations with Lisa Slavitt and I about how to move some things forward. So I really appreciate that. So congratulations, Beth. You are greatly missed in the space, but I am so excited for you. So thank you for inviting me to this.
Hi, everyone. It's so moving to be here in Beth's world. Hi, Beth. It's beautiful to see you. So much has been said. I'm actually overflowing a little bit, and I have so many stories rushing through me, but I just wanted to say one main thing that I feel like hasn't been given all of the attention it deserves. But first, on my way to that, in this, I mean, the multi-generational, intergenerational feminist community that you make all the time is what I'm most attentive to right now. It's really the living legacy that you have created and that you continue to create. And even now in this celebration, I had an aha moment about some of your scholarship. I think the Woman Resisting AIDS book, I'd forgotten about it. I think it's going to be a missing link for me about the move to embodiment. And so thank you still for such contributions. But the piece I really want to address, because I don't feel like it's been given its proper due, and it's the sort of following the genealogy of Fatima and Silvana's noting of your in certain formal spaces. I just want to honor your eyebrows, because I feel like the raised Beth Schneider eyebrow is one of the initiating feminist traditions that made me who I am. I feel like the subtextual parallel world of your communications to some of us in a room who couldn't believe what others of us in a room were doing or saying helped me know that there was a powerful, vibrant academic tradition of resistance and critique that I wanted to be a part of. And you're so professional and dry and wry, but that the signaling of your critical response to things with a lot of warmth at the same time was really something I wanted to live up to and live into. So thank you for all of you and for being so true to yourself and allowing us to be true to ourselves. And I really love you, Beth Schneider.
Hi, Bethy. Where are you on my screen? Hi. Well, first I want to acknowledge Jane and Kat for seamlessly bringing us all together. This is a marvelous event. I love it. I've been thinking for a few weeks about how we feel Beth's presence in our lives. My name's Sherry, and I've known Beth since August 1981, when she moved to Santa Barbara for her new position at UCSB. In fact, it was Sarah Fenstermaker, who I also call Sally, who came to me at some point before that, asking if, knowing that I had a small apartment in the back of a place I once co-owned, if we would make room in that apartment for Sally, for Beth. 1981 to now, that's 42 years. Happily, gratefully, Beth, your first year here, you did live in that small apartment. I once co-owned, and happily and gratefully, we became friends beginning then and over the next few years. To date, that's also 37 years as co-hosts of Passover Seders. Maybe I'll say infamous Passover Seders. 36 years as faithful members of a flexible, serious, thought-provoking, occasionally cantankerous book group. 9 years with the same group in an exploration of what we think, we know, and what we feel about getting older. And as we're still getting older, thankfully, that group is continuing. That's 13 years on campus, Beth and I, at the same time, each of us representing feminism through our respective pathways, listening to and supporting each other. We were always and only a phone call away, and I frequently looked to both Beth and Sally for mentoring my growth as a feminist. The Women's Center from 1976 to 1994 was my home base. And truthfully, I didn't fully come into my own as eventually a feminist scholar until many years later. So I want to say it was the greatest honor to be asked by you both to join the founding committee of Women's Studies, because I do believe that you knew this about me before I did. Still counting down over many years, Beth and I have kept up our quarterly dates for music and dance performances. Susan and Beth, Carol and I have dinner and cards dates every month. For years, we've gone to protest rallies and marches together. And of course, we have our shared birthday parties, Beth and I. Over all these years, I reminisce a lot. We experienced, Beth, you and I, adjustments and loss and sorrowful times. And loads of fun and triumphs and joy throughout our friendship in those years. Beth and I have always talked about our personal lives with each other, and as a result, we've undertaken various research projects. Here are a few of those. What does it mean, we asked, to be Jewish in Santa Barbara? The experience of clothes shopping in celebration of our changing bodies. Walking 60+ miles in support of breast cancer awareness over 3 days in 1999, a phenomenological inquiry. And still a work in progress, a mixed method study with the question, how do two atheist, feminist, cultural Jews interrogate the meaning of Passover 36 times? Beth, I have some words for you and for everybody from a former sociology and women's studies double major. These are her words. I was doing intense healing work around my childhood sexual abuse. I asked for an extension on an assignment. I felt heard and supported and was given the extension. Dr. Schneider personified the notion that the personal is political and that when you support one woman, you are supporting all women. And I'm forever grateful to her. And Beth, later, I will be able to share more of what she said and who she is. But words from another friend, someone who many of you might know, Farfalla Bora. And Fala says, I think of Beth as one of the founding mothers of the Gender Research Group and the Women's Studies program, along with Pat Cohen, Ursula Mallendorf, Sally Fenstermakers, and others. At that time, there were hardly any tenure or or tenured track female professors. Beth and her colleagues made a significant contribution to changing the composition of the faculty at UCSB. Yeah, there's more work to do, but Beth was definitely one of the driving forces for change. So Beth's presence in my life and ours, I think, she listens and remembers, observes. She knows your taste, your preferences, your desires, your dreams. She enlarges our understanding of the personal, intersectional, and political. She loves you for all that you are. She is a fierce defender of justice for all and unfailingly committed to true democracy. And I got a little personal. Not only can Beth count cards, no one kibitzes like Beth does at the card table. Beth, you are a most treasured sister who fiercely cares about everyone here today, who has held me up and close for years. I cherish Beth, my Jewish co-conspirator. Carol and I love you, Bethy, and that means we also cherish Susan, Noah, Lily, Jazz, and Amber. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Gomez-Parra, and I'm a PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz in the Sociology and Latin America and Latinx Studies department. And I was a McNair Scholar at UC Santa Barbara. I majored in sociology. I double majored in sociology and feminist studies. I was a McNair Scholar between 2013 and 2015. And so earlier we heard from the faculty and staff side. So I just kind of wanted to continue that conversation as a student. So I just want to thank Dr. Schneider. That's what she is to me. I still call her Dr. Schneider, and Dr. Brody and Monique and Holly Rose, who's not here, but she was my graduate mentor, for all their hard work for the McNair Scholars Program. As a first-gen Latina, I feel that program gave me a sense of community and a home base, figuratively and literally. I remember that you all trusted us and gave us keys. So we would, with my cohort, we would go and during finals and midterms, we would go and study and work on our research. And all the support that I got from you all was amazing. And I always attribute that program to why I am in graduate school. I still have a screenshot of my acceptance letter from the McNair Scholars Program, and it's on my Instagram. And I remember when I got that acceptance letter, oh my God, I'm gonna cry. When I got that acceptance, I felt like it was the first time that somebody believed in me, at least an institution. And I felt that people believed that what I had to say from a first-gen Latina perspective was important, and especially because it was sexualities. And as I have come to learn now, sociology and academia in general doesn't take sociology seriously, and even less from a feminist of color perspective. So thank you for telling me that what I had to say was important, and for all your hard work making sure that the McNair Scholars Program got funding, because without that, I really couldn't have applied to graduate school. And I was one of those students who cried in Dr. Schneider's office when I was getting all those rejections. And I just remember leaving her office and knowing that everything was going to be okay. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And then the second thing that I want to say is thank you for all the intergenerational feminist mentoring and how you have shaped UCSB and the sociology department. I had no idea that UCSB used to be a male-dominated campus, because when I got there, I always saw UCSB as such a feminist institution. It was easy for me to take feminist courses. The first course that I took was in my first quarter with Dr. Lori Oakes. And I remember sitting in the large lecture hall and learning that I didn't have to shave my legs. And then I didn't shave my legs for many months because it was a sort of new feminist awakening. And then I went off and I took classes with my McNair faculty mentor, Lila, and I learned about sexual fluidity and I learned about hookup culture. And then I started my project with her under her guidance in the McNair Scholars Program. And it just always felt like a feminist space to me. And I didn't know all the work that you did to create that. And even your intergenerational feminist training has even saved me at UCSC. Professor Falcone is here and she has been so integral to my training at UC Santa Cruz. I've been meaning to share this story with you, Professor Falcone and everybody else, but I now serve as a graduate mentor for many programs, especially, I always attribute that to the McNair Scholars Program. I had such a wonderful experience that I want to pay that forward. And we were having a training and there was this man, this graduate student who was mansplaining to me and trying to tell me that transnational feminism, it was not a women of color feminist theory. And as you all know, Professor Falcone is an expert in transnational feminist theory, and she has trained me. And through her, I was able to learn, transnational feminist theory emerged from Dr. Mohanty. And so I spoke up and I basically gave him a mini lecture about how it is, as well as intersectionality. And I said, just because non-feminist scholars are using that framework does not mean that it's not a feminist framework, and so he stayed quiet. And I feel like that was one of my proudest feminist moments because I was not silent and I just felt like this is the scholar that I am and this is the scholar that I am meant to be, like pushing conversations and research from a feminist and particularly a feminist of color perspective. So I just once again want to thank you and just know that your legacy continues.
Good day. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be a part of this recognition of Beth Schneider's impact with us. And I love the phrase of the Beth Schneider effect. That really has been something that resonates with me, the experience I've had with Beth over the years. I'm a non-academic, but I did work at UCSB for 37 years. And the last 10 years that I was there, I worked as the program director for the Women's Center. And in that capacity, had the opportunity to do a lot more professional work with Beth, even though we did a lot of work together at that point in time, also with the Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee. What I really appreciated about Beth at that point in time was how she was willing to be a community activist as well as an academic. So it was really hard to get women faculty to come out to protests in the community. It was really hard to get them to see how important it was for them to become a member of Santa Barbara Women's Political Committee, to have an impact on their life in the greater community that they lived in. But Beth was one that always listened. Beth was one who was always there. And one of the things that she did for me in terms of reaffirming my position as sort of an outsider on the inside that I've always been all my life. She would come up to me during the times that I was president of the Women's Political Committee and ask for a copy of every speech I ever gave. Every time I spoke, either as an introduction to a dinner or a political event or during the peace marches during 2003 and 4, she always asked for a written copy of my work because she was archiving the history and the impact of that organization on a community. And it gave me a sense of real importance in the fact that my words had some meaning. And so I really appreciate that. I've really, that did a lot to sort of turn me around in my own thinking myself. So for that, I'm grateful. I love being in the street with you. I love being shoulder to shoulder in all of the things that we've tried to do to have an impact to make Santa Barbara a better place to be a woman. So I really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you so much, Beth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Karoff, and I have the privilege of being a dear friend of Beth's for many, many years, many decades, actually, and I am grateful for that. I also worked at UCSB, as many others have spoken about, in a staff position, and one of my jobs was to be the executive director of the Academic Senate for 8 years, which involved wrangling faculty into doing work that was outside of their scholarly work and outside of their research and their teaching. And Beth, I guess I want to highlight the notion of service to an institution, which I think is an important aspect of Beth's career, as an associate dean, as a chair, and some of these, of course, overlap with departmental sorts of roles, of course, and as the director of the McNair program, all of which, really contributed to the institution in ways that are really, I think, pretty significant, but hidden and not really visible to people who aren't in there, so to speak. And I think that she also provided a lot of wonderful guidance to me as chair of this, as the executive director of the Senate, to work with some of the faculty members who were her colleagues, who I would sometimes find interesting to work with, if not challenging. But nonetheless, I do want to just say that her role in enhancing the quality of the institution overall, in a place that was not really valuing some of the things she was doing in the ways that it should have been valuing. It's not an easy campus to work on, and it's not an easy administration to work with. And Beth carved out little ways or big ways to really have some significant impact on students, on faculty, and on the staff with whom she worked as well. So I'm grateful for her friendship. We also, by the way, have been parenting children around the same time, and we have young adult children who we are continuing, of course, to parent and support as they manage to navigate the world these days. So all of which is to say, I love you, Beth, and I'm so proud to be your friend. And thank you for all the things you've done.
I'm just going to jump in really quickly to say that we have 4 minutes left, and we have Ron and Gary who are going to speak, and then Ellen, and hopefully we can get you in there right before we end, because Beth is a busy woman with some plans at noon.
Great.
Nope,
great.
you're disappearing. We need to maybe take
no,
out the.
it's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So yes, we're a bickering couple, and we're trying to figure out how to do this right.
How to both be seen.
Ron and I have known Beth for many years. Ron's known her for longer than I.
I met Beth soon after I got to UCSB in '81 as a grad student in psychology, the counseling psychology program. And at that point, it was probably talking about a meeting at the Women's Center about organizing for LGBTQ staffs, students, faculty, and then later about AIDS. And I was I confided in her when I had tested positive and then converted to AIDS. We were also on the board of the Pacific Pride together, and she was also somebody I confided when I told her about a 5-year crush I'd had on a man I'd met at Nautilus. And so we go for it, which I did.
Okay, here comes the stalking story. Okay.
No, I won't go that
far. Good. I just have been privileged enough to known Beth for the last 20 X number of years. But she and Susan were our neighbors for quite a few years, and it was wonderful as they were doing the searching for a wonderful son to adopt. And when they came back, they came
from Hawaii.
They came into our place, and we held Noah, and it was like a football in my hand. It was so much fun to be able to babysit for them and to help them, and just to have that as a. I think Beth is one of those people that is so humbly impactful. She's really subtle, at least with me, subtle, understated, but when she speaks, it's like, get out of her way, because it's really, really impactful. So I am, as another UCSB person, at least for the next 39 days, I've run into her on campus quite a few in many situations, and I've always been so impressed and so impressed by her just her ability to connect with people and her wanting to be so generous with folks. So I love you, Beth, and I'm really looking forward to meeting for lunch on a Tuesday, and neither of us having anything else that we have to do right afterwards.
I also want to say that I'm really happy that we were able to attend each other's weddings, yours at your house and ours at the top of the courthouse some years later, and that we share the same anniversary date.
Yes, we do. We share the same anniversary.
Wish you all the best in your retirement and years to come.
Yes.
Good friends. Thank you.
Ellie, go for it. It's great to have you as the last speaker.
Okay, well, I'm just delighted. I'm delighted to speak for just 1 minute about Beth as a really stellar friend. We met in 1968 in Ann Arbor in the anti-war and women's liberation movements, in consciousness raising groups, and on the streets. And about 3 years later, we drove east looking for a new place to live, settling on Springfield, Massachusetts, where we rented apartments in the same house. We've collaborated on research and writing, but mostly we've been activists together and friends. And Beth is a really, really stellar friend. It's 55 years since we met. We still talk every few months via Zoom between Santa Barbara and Northampton, continuing to share our lives. Bethy, I love you. Thank you.
Beth, do you want to have the final word?
I don't know what the final word is. I'm completely overcome and overwhelmed by all of you and all the love that's come my way today. And so thank you all for being here. Thank you for being in my lives. And those who didn't get to speak will speak. And again, I just want to thank Jane for the continual pressing on me to make this thing happen. And yeah, you know, there's the CV and then there's the life. And, you know, we aimed a little bit for the life here rather than just the academic. And I think it worked for all of us. So thank you, Jane. Thank you all for being here. And I love you all.
Goodbye, everyone. Everyone who
Beth, we love you.
I will send a link to this video and also to the slides so you can take a look at them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Lovely to see you all.
Great to see all these faces.
Really.
Thanks.